Tonight, we unravel the horrifying true story of a man who blended in so perfectly that no one ever thought to look at him twice. A man who walked the halls of academia with clean hands by day and left behind scenes of unspeakable horror by night. This is a case that shocked the state of Michigan to its core, not just because of the brutality of the crimes, but because of who committed them. A well-groomed, articulate, seemingly respectable university student who held a position of trust as a teaching assistant, and yet behind that carefully polished exterior was someone capable of unspeakable violence. We're taking you into the heart of a chilling mystery set in a peaceful college town where 7 young women were murdered, not quickly, not cleanly, but with violence so savage that even seasoned investigators were shaken to their core. Over the next minutes, we will walk through every detail, from the calculated methods he used to choose his victims, to the way he stalked them, gained their trust, and ultimately left their broken bodies behind in remote fields and ditches, all while continuing to sit in class, pass exams, and flash that same disarming smile. You'll hear about the stunning failures that allowed him to keep killing, the mounting fear that gripped the community, and the long-overlooked clues that eventually brought his reign of terror to an end. We'll examine the man behind the mask, the twisted patterns that revealed his true nature, and the evidence that finally cracked the case, and most importantly, we will name every victim whose life was stolen, because they are not just part of his story, they are the reason it must be told. This is the story of John Norman Collins, the man who was a teacher by day and something else entirely when the sun went down. Subscribe now and turn on your notification bell icon because you won't believe what comes next. John Norman Collins was born on June 17, 1947. A child of post-war America, raised in the heartland of Michigan, where the values of discipline, hard work, and public image were deeply ingrained, and where boys were taught to shake hands firmly, look you in the eye, and keep their troubles tucked away behind polite smiles. He seemed to be the very product of that world, clean-cut and well-dressed, polite in speech, athletic in build, and utterly unremarkable in all the ways that allowed him to move unnoticed through crowds, through classrooms, and eventually, through crime scenes. He enrolled at Eastern Michigan University with dreams of becoming a teacher, the kind of profession that exudes trust, mentorship, and safety, and by all outward appearances, he was exactly the kind of young man any parent would be proud to see guiding a classroom of children. He majored in elementary education, took his studies seriously, and even took up a part-time job as a teaching assistant, where he worked with young students during the day, smiling, nodding, offering helpful advice, the picture of reliability and ambition. His presence on campus was magnetic to some. He was a member of Theta Chi fraternity, popular enough to be remembered, but modest enough to never draw suspicion, always straddling that perfect line between sociability and subtlety. A man who understood how to blend in, how to say the right thing, and more importantly, how to be whoever you needed him to be in the moment. He didn't drink excessively, he didn't get into trouble with the law, and he had no known criminal background of any kind. No paper trail, no obvious signs of violence or disorder. Just an easygoing, intelligent college student with a warm handshake and a future in teaching. But what no one realized, not his classmates, not his professors, not his fraternity brothers, and certainly not the young women whose paths would eventually cross with his, was that beneath the polished exterior, beneath the Letterman charm and the Midwestern manners, there existed a festering darkness that was growing stronger with every passing semester. It began with a name, a single face in the yearbook, a young woman with a future, bright-eyed, ambitious, unaware she would soon become the first page in a horrifying pattern of violence. Her name was Mary Fleazar, just 19 years old, a student at Eastern Michigan University. On July 9, 1967, She vanished, as if the earth had opened and swallowed her whole. Days later, her body was discovered, not peacefully, not gently, but slashed, stabbed, mutilated beyond what most could imagine. Bite marks on her skin, as if someone had tried to consume her, like she had been turned into a message rather than a victim, a warning. And yet, at the time, no one truly understood what they were seeing. Not yet. Less than a year later, it happened again. Joan Shell, age 20. Her disappearance echoed Mary's in eerie detail. Last seen hitchhiking, hoping to catch a ride with someone, maybe even someone she knew, someone she trusted. She never made it to her destination. Her body bore multiple stab wounds, her dignity violated, her life taken by brute force. The brutality seemed personal. The wounds screamed of rage. This wasn't random. This wasn't opportunistic. This was the work of someone who planned, who watched, who enjoyed what they were doing. And if authorities had seen it for what it was, a pattern forming, maybe others would still be alive today. Then came Jane Mixer, age 23, found murdered on March 20th, 1969. Her death was so similar, so familiar, that it was almost automatically pinned on the same predator. But decades later, in a twist no one could have predicted, DNA proved that Collins didn't kill her. Another man did. Gary Leiterman, a completely different killer, operating in the same terrifying timeline. Which raises the question, how many monsters walk among us at any given time? How many operate side by side without ever crossing paths? Only 4 days after Jane's murder, another girl disappeared. Her name was Marilyn Skelton. She was just 16, a high school student, a child. Her body was found mutilated, not simply killed, but desecrated. Her death wasn't fast, it wasn't merciful, and the killer didn't try to hide what he had done. He wanted her found, wanted the scene to speak louder than words ever could. And then, the youngest yet, Dawn Basom, only 13 years old, a child walking home, a child with a backpack and homework and dreams that would never come true. On April 15, 1969, she was kidnapped, and what happened next shook the community in a way it had never experienced before. She was strangled with a cord. Her clothing had been cut away and taken, her innocence stolen in a way so violent, so deliberate, that even seasoned detectives were left shaken. Less than 2 months passed before Alice Kalam, 21, vibrant, full of life, was found in Ann Arbor, shot, stabbed, assaulted. The killer wasn't slowing down. He was growing bolder, more efficient, less cautious. The details in her murder suggested something more than impulse. They pointed to someone who was evolving, someone who was learning from every kill. And then, all the way in Santa Monica, California, across the country, another girl lost her life. Roxy Ann Phillips, just 17, killed while visiting relatives. Her case wasn't officially tied to the others, not legally, but the links were there. Witnesses, timelines, circumstantial evidence, and Collins. He was there too, near her, near the scene. But California never filed charges. The lack of extradition left her case floating, unsolved, and lingering like a ghost with no name on the tombstone. And finally, the last known victim, Karen Sue Binman, 18 years old, abducted on July 23, 1969. Her death was the final piece of a puzzle that law enforcement could no longer ignore. Physical evidence was found in Collins' uncle's basement, a discovery that would tie the handsome, soft-spoken teacher's aide to a trail of brutalized bodies stretching across time and geography. Karen's death, in many ways, became the unraveling thread. The moment the mask began to slip. Now step back and look at the pattern. All of these victims were young. Most were students. Almost all were brunette. Most were petite. Each one was targeted with precision, their clothing often torn, missing, or deliberately cut, their bodies dumped in remote or wooded areas. They were not simply killed, they were staged, left behind like grim signatures, part of a private ritual only the killer understood. The mutilations were consistent, the sexual assaults were methodical, and still, no one knew who to fear, because no one suspected the clean-cut man in the classroom. So now, we ask you, do you believe Collins acted alone? Did one man commit all of these atrocities, carefully, obsessively, went without help, without witnesses, without anyone close to him suspecting a thing? Or could there have been someone else? Someone he confided in? Or worse, someone who watched and said nothing? Let us know what you think in the comments, because as much as this story focuses on one man, there's something deeper beneath it. A chilling truth about the people we walk past every day and the horrors they may be hiding just beneath the surface. As the body count continued to rise and the horror of each murder sank deeper into the bones of Michigan's college towns, the once peaceful campus atmosphere at Eastern Michigan University was shattered beyond recognition. Halls that once echoed with laughter and late-night study sessions were now thick with whispers, suspicion, and dread, while dormitories locked their doors earlier and women walked in pairs or not at all. An entire community gripped by terror, haunted by a phantom they could not name. The press swarmed like vultures. Headlines screamed of another co-ed lost, and the police, juggling mounting pressure, conflicting tips, and a killer who left no obvious trail, began chasing shadows until July of 1969, when 18-year-old Karen Sue Binman disappeared, and something finally shifted. She had been seen getting on the back of a motorcycle with a clean-cut man, someone who smiled, someone who didn't look dangerous, someone who could pass as your friend, your neighbor, or your teacher's aide. And as her mutilated body was discovered days later, left in a ravine like discarded trash, investigators stumbled on a critical thread, the kind of evidence that could be touched, tested, and proven. Hair fibers and bits of cloth on her body were meticulously matched to samples collected from the basement of John Norman Collins' uncle's home. A basement Collins had regular access to, a place that would soon take on a chilling new meaning. From there, the dam began to break. Eyewitnesses recalled seeing him with Karen that day. His timeline couldn't be squared with the facts, and slowly, a pattern of deceit emerged beneath the polished smile. Until finally, when brought in for questioning, Collins kept his composure, speaking with the ease of a man who had rehearsed this moment in the mirror, who thought his intellect and charm could keep him above suspicion. But the detectives were watching more than his words. They were tracking his tone, the subtle tension in his jaw, the pauses in his responses. And then came the moment no one could have predicted. Collins, cool and collected, asked to use the restroom at the station, and after he returned, something didn't sit right. The officers checked the bathroom and discovered torn fragments of what appeared to be incriminating material, flushed or at least attempted to be, evidence he had tried to destroy in those few desperate minutes alone, as if shredding a piece of cloth or paper could unmake the web already closing in on him. A last, clumsy act of control from a man who had controlled everything until now. As the summer of 1970 unfolded, the courtroom was packed, the air electric with anticipation and outrage as families of the victims sat in stiff silence, clutching tissue, photos, and each other's hands, while reporters scribbled furiously and cameras clicked behind every movement, because this was no ordinary trial. This was the reckoning of a man once admired, now accused of unspeakable horrors. And as John Norman Collins entered in a neatly pressed suit, with his signature dark hair combed perfectly into place, eyes scanning the room as if still playing the role of the charming young scholar, it became clear to all that the face of evil could wear the softest smile. The prosecution methodically laid out their case, piece by agonizing piece, reconstructing the final hours of Karen Sue Binman's life with the precision of a scalpel. The eyewitness sightings, the motorcycle ride, the fibers in the basement, the physical evidence that spoke louder than any testimony ever could, while the defense clung to theories of coincidence, procedural error, and doubt, grasping at the last legal straws they could find in a case that had already taken its toll on an entire state's sense of safety. And as testimony after testimony was delivered, often through tears, often in graphic, gut-wrenching detail, the portrait of Collins as a cold, calculating predator hardened into focus. A man who stalked, charmed, abducted, assaulted, and murdered, not in a fit of madness, but with disturbing consistency and control. And then, after weeks of gripping proceedings, the jury finally emerged, and in a moment that sent a wave of both anguish and relief through the gallery, they read the verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. And just like that, the charming teacher's aide was handed a life sentence, without parole, condemned to a prison cell where he could no longer hurt anyone. But even with the conviction, even with justice served by legal standards, the questions lingered. Why had it taken so long? Could more have been done to prevent the deaths of the other girls? Did the media spectacle bring awareness, or just exploit tragedy? And most painfully of all, for the families left with birthdays never celebrated, rooms left untouched, and memories frozen in time. Did this feel like justice, or merely the end of a story that never should have begun? Sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, John Norman Collins was locked away in the cold, gray confines of Michigan's Marquette Branch Prison, a place where time slows, where the silence is deafening, and where a man who once walked free through the halls of a university now paces endlessly inside a concrete cage, clinging to the same hollow claim of innocence he has maintained for decades. But no appeal, no legal maneuver, and no amount of denial has ever reversed the outcome of his trial, and every attempt to rewrite his narrative has failed under the weight of the evidence and the bloodied memories of those who never made it home. And yet, even as the bars closed around him, his shadow never stopped reaching outward. The community of Ypsilanti remains marked, not just by the crimes, but by the fear they left behind, a fear that lingers in whispers between parents and children, in the flowers placed at annual memorials, in the nervous glances of young women walking alone, and most of all, in the unwritten rule passed down like folklore. Never, ever get into a stranger's car. No matter how polite he is, how well he speaks, or how familiar his face may seem. Because in the end, the story of John Norman Collins isn't just about a killer who was caught. It's about a town that never truly healed, a generation whose innocence was shattered, and a reminder that sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones we should fear the most. If this story unsettled you, if it made you look twice at the people you pass on the street or question the face behind the smile, then take a moment to hit that like button. Not just to support the channel, but to help bring these haunting histories back into the light where they belong, because silence only protects the guilty. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone who believes monsters don't walk in daylight, share this episode with them. Because sometimes the truth is more terrifying than fiction. And don't forget to subscribe, because every week we pull back the curtain on the darkest corners of real-life horror, the cases that shook towns, shattered lives, and changed the way we think about safety, trust, and evil itself. Next time, we'll take you inside the decaying walls of the abandoned Eloise Asylum, once a massive psychiatric complex housing over 10,000 patients, a place where treatments turned to torture, where pain echoed through the tunnels, and where, even now, some swear the walls still whisper the names of those who never left.